One.
Okay, good evening. My name is First Class Lawson, and today I'm going to give an informative speech and supply discipline. My job today is to inform you about going back to the basic. We keep hearing about back to the basic. We're talking about back to the regulations, doing things that the regulation states that we need to do as logistic person, our NRC holders, PBO, and so forth. My specific purpose is to tell you guys what a good supply discipline program would be like. And the main idea today is to explain also about the joint inventory that we normally do when you change NRC holders. Say you're taking over for someone, you want to make sure that person is here, where you could do a joint inspection or a joint inventory, as some people would say. And before I go further, I want to just give you a quick intro. For the last 12 years, the Army been at war. So with the Army being at war, we're lacking some of the basic fundamentals of command, supply, discipline, inventory, and so forth. Having a good supply discipline program will make sure we have what we call combat ready Army. We are ready at any time to conduct business in a war situation. Today I will give you the facts of property accountability. To begin, let's talk about your role as a property accountable person, or NRC holders. One of my main points going to be property accountability, and my next point going to be property accountability required a responsible person. You cannot just pick anyone to say you're going to be in charge of my property. You want somebody that's responsible. You want somebody that's actually going to be held accountable. And we need to be good steward at property accountability. Some of the things you want to do when assuming property accountability is to do a joint inventory with the outgoing person. If the outgoing person is not available, however, you have 30 days to conduct this inventory and report back to the primary NRC holder to tell them what your findings are. If all the property is there, at that point, what you're trying to do is make sure that they don't hold you responsible for items that's supposed to be there, but however are not there. So that's the good thing about doing your inventory, even if the previous NRC holder is gone. So no matter what happens, you still want to do that. Okay. I'm going to touch on inventories. I'm going to touch on what are the roles of a property book officer. I'm also going to touch on the role what are a primary NRC holder and a sub NRC holders are. Next, I will also go into joint inventory. Once identified as an NRC holder. What that basically is, once somebody identify you as an NRC holder, what are the steps you need to take? What are the questions you need to ask? You want to also get a current NRC from your supply representative. The only way you could be sure that the property you're signing for is accurate is by getting the most current NRC, and you could go from there and pretty much mirror what the previous NRC holder have, in order to make sure that the property is current as of today's date, which is say June 30. I also mentioned you want to report this to the primary NRC holder. You want to also seek the PBO guidance. What would he do in this situation if there's a piece of property that's lost? Okay, without further ado, the first thing is to understand your role. What is my role as an NRC holder? The receiver of Army property is the property book officer. We all call him the PBO. In this organization, we have three premier as our PBO. The person who signed for the property from the property book officer, we call it primary and receipt holder. That person is Captain Moore. And once Captain Moore signed for this property, he then want to sign it down to someone lower, which we then call a sub and receipt holder. The sub and receipt holder, like myself, Sergeant Doherty, these people are now become accountable for property once they sign for it from the primary and receipt holder. If the primary and receipt holder then further issue that receipt, it show now that the subordinate, which is myself, Sergeant Doherty, have full responsibility. If the sub and receipt holder then chooses to sub further down, that's on that person to do so. However, you could always sub and receipt property infinite times to show there's a chain of responsibility. The sub and receipt holder should then sign down the individual property, like I just spoke of. Some of these property could be the basic computers that you use inside your office. You know, you have that one person that signed for it from the commander, he then put it in the section and nobody else signed for it. We don't consider that good property accountability, but we need someone to be always responsible. Okay. Whenever a new person takes over, the annual receipt or sub-annual receipt should be updated. You should conduct an inventory to reflect the changes and then report to the supply personnel, the supplier rep, to let them know these are the changes, and if there's any deficiency, at that point is when you highlight it. Inventory all property, including the component items. We typically call this COE. And verify the serial numbers before you sign. Number one, you don't want to sign for something and then later on saying, well, oh, I just look at this and I didn't check the serial number. Because oftentimes you have items that resemble, but if you didn't check the serial number and you see something that resembles, you're going to think it's yours and then try to own it, which they actually belong to someone else. So you want to verify also your serial number when you assume property that have serial number as a way of identifying that property. It is highly encouraged to do a joint inventory with the outgoing individual. It is highly encouraged to do on-the-spot correction by calling that supply rep at that time to let them know this is my deficiency, you know, what do I do from here? And at that point they will give you guidance. Once you sign the annual receipt, you're now responsible for that property. You're putting your signature, your date and time, saying, I now assume this. And what that does is it shows when you took over, so if anything happened previously, they could always look at the date that you actually signed for it and say, well, this property was last before the person actually signed. So that's how, when we talk about flippers, we talk about statement of charges, that's how those things come into play to let we know who's going to be responsible. Okay. To conclude, as we can see, property accountability is an important part of military and civilian life. Our job here is to safeguard the Army property. We need to be good steward in order to stop waste, fraud, waste, and abuse. The goal is to provide responsible people with a single listing and regulation to guide them. To summarize, we talk about good supply discipline. We talk about the roles and responsibilities of the property book officer, the primary annual receipt, and the sub-annual receipt holders. As you can see, I have a slide showing a joint inventory that's being conducted. And the next slide, you will see the PBO, just a booklet showing the PBO. And like you see here, you know, his role is to receive that main item and then send it on down to the primary annual receipt holder. At this point in time, what are your questions about property accountability, the responsibilities, and the roles? Go ahead.
Okay. The only time that you would do inventory is when you handed it off to someone else, or is there like a quarterly thing that you have to do?
You could do inventory as you see necessary. You don't have to definitely wait on a changeover where you do this joint inventory. Some could just tell you I need to inventory my property, and you just go verify serial numbers just to make sure it's okay.
Yeah, what is a protocol if the commander is about to depart and the soldier that is supposed to sign for that equipment has not arrived? How do you, what's the transfer of authority, or who's
Typically,
responsible for that equipment?
Typically, if the soldier is not going to be available, someone has to sign for that property if the soldier going to leave more than 30 days. If someone going to leave the organization for more than 30 days, someone need to be identified to say you're going to be the new honor receipt holder until the actual person get here, then they do another inventory and sign it over.
What if the commander or the HRC holder needs more than 30 days? What's the procedure on that?
But if they need more than 30 days, that would have to bring up to the commander, because at the bottom line is his property. So he's going to make that decision. Case in point, where we're deployed sometimes or we're overseas, and the commander is doing his inventory, cyclic, and the honor receipt holder is not here, he have to annotate that and let it be known to the PBO that was still missing one honor receipt holder. Go ahead.
The primary hand receipt holder, is it always the commander?
Yes, it's going to be the commander, because he's overall responsible for all the property that we use, and then he sub it down to sub-honor receipt holders. All right? Okay. Thank you very much. That concludes my speech. And once again, thank you all for coming out.